December 8, 1941. 9:40 a.m. Lingayen Gulf, Luzon, Philippine Islands. Engines rumble beneath riveted steel plates. The Type 95. Hago light tank shudders as its Mitsubishi ND6120 diesel vibrates through the hull. Salt wind whips across the landing beach. Infantry of the 48th Division move inland through rising smoke from naval bombardment. Inside the turret, Sergeant Major Hiroshi Nakamura of the 4th Tank Regiment grips a pair of signal flags tucked beside his knee. The periscope shows palms bending in tropical wind, Filipino defenders retreating in confusion. Lieutenant Colonel Shinosuke Sonoda stands upright from his command tank hatch, several vehicles behind binoculars pressed to his eyes. He watches the line of tanks advance in disciplined intervals, each spaced precisely according to pre-invasion rehearsal. There is no urgency in his posture. Orders were finalized weeks earlier at Saigon. Routes, plotted fallback points, designated artillery timings synchronized. The Imperial Japanese Army believes in orchestration, precision, obedience. The battle unfolds exactly as planned, and the tanks respond exactly as drilled. Nakamura taps the driver's shoulder. The tank lurches left according to prearranged signal. Outside, another commander stands half-exposed, raising a red and white flag in a deliberate arc to indicate wheel right. Dust rises, but formation remains intact. No radios chatter between vehicles, only engine growl and shouted confirmations. Captain Masaru Iwata once argued during exercises in Manchuria that radio communication between tanks might increase flexibility. The procurement office dismissed it. Radios are heavy, vulnerable, prone to interception. Tank warfare as conceived in Tokyo depends on momentum guided by prearranged doctrine, not improvisation. Besides, the infantry carries field telephones. Artillery units maintain wired connections. The tank's role is breakthrough, not debate. Ahead, a Filipino machine gun nest erupts unexpectedly from a concealed trench. Bullets ping against Nakamura's hull. The commander scans for instructions. He waits. Across the formation, a flag snaps upward. Halt, adjust line. The tanks break almost simultaneously. The nest is silenced by a short burst from a Type 97 57mm gun, 2 vehicles to the right. Dust settles. The column resumes. Column. Controlled. Methodical. Lieutenant Colonel Sonoda lowers his binoculars and allows himself a thin smile. The Western armies rely on gadgets, he has said more than once. Radio's mechanized clutter over complicated doctrine. The Japanese soldier requires discipline and clarity. Plans made in advance are superior to chaotic battlefield chatter. The Philippines will fall quickly. You can hear the certainty in their movements. There is no hesitation, only execution. Weeks later, January 1942. The advance toward Bataan proceeds with the same choreography. Signal flags ripple above hatches like bright birds guiding metal beasts through jungle roads. When terrain narrows, tank commanders dismount briefly to relay visual instructions down the line. There is pride in this simplicity. Colonel Sonoda briefs his officers beneath a canvas awning. Maps are weighted with spent shell casings. He traces arrows with a gloved finger. The Americans retreat in disorder, he says. Their reliance on machines makes them inflexible. We remain unified. Major Kenji Tanaka nods. Our formations require no constant conversation. Orders are given once. There is agreement around the table. What they do not see is what lies beyond the next campaign. In training grounds, back home, armored officers practice semaphore precision. Instructors emphasize line of sight, rehearsed maneuver, synchronized timing. Tanks are not individual thinkers. They are components in a larger mechanism. Across the Pacific, another mechanism is forming. Fort Knox, Kentucky. Late 1941. American instructors lean over M3. Stuart light tanks fitted with SCR 508 radio sets mounted beside the commander's seat. Wires run cleanly to throat microphones. Antennas flex as engines idle. Captain Bruce C. Clark listens to static resolve into voice. Blue 1 to Blue 3. Advance left flank. The order travels instantly through air. There is no flag, no dismount, no waiting for visual confirmation. In Japan, this development is noted but not feared. Intelligence reports mention American radio standardization, but officers in Tokyo dismiss it as technical excess. Battles are decided by spirit, not circuitry. Spring 1942. Malaya and Singapore have fallen. The Imperial Japanese Army's armored formations have encountered British tanks, but terrain limited maneuver. There has been no true mechanized duel across open ground. Doctrine remains untested under fluid opposition. Lieutenant Colonel Sonoda reviews after-action reports. The language is confident. Enemy withdrew as anticipated. Advance maintained according to plan. Signal discipline preserved. He folds the papers carefully. At this moment, no one believes disaster is minutes, months, a year away. Inside each Type 95 turret, the flag kit remains neatly folded. Training has validated belief. Rigid planning has delivered victory. There is no perceived need for adaptation. Engagements have unfolded as expected. The engines hum. The flags rise and fall. The plan works, and because it works, no one questions what happens when it does not. May 7th, 1942. 2:15 p.m., the outskirts of Tungu, Burma, Savor. Heat presses down like a physical weight. Dust hangs low over the road where elements of the Imperial Japanese Army's 14th Tank Regiment idle in staggered formation. The Type 97 Chiha medium tanks sit hull down behind a shallow embankment, their 57mm guns trained toward a distant tree line. Inside one turret, First Lieutenant Harada Shigemitsu adjusts his goggles and squints through the sight. The jungle ahead seems still too still. Infantry scouts have reported British armored movement in the sector. Nothing substantial, nothing organized. Harada raises a yellow signal flag to indicate readiness. Several tanks to his left mirror the motion. The formation holds. Then the unexpected begins quietly. A shell cracks through the air, striking the dirt beside the second tank in line. Earth erupts upward. Before Harada can locate the source, another impact slams into a Chiha's frontal plate. Sparks flash. The crew inside shouts. Where Harada demands, his driver cranes his head uselessly. There is no visible signal from the regimental command tank. No prearranged cue for this angle of engagement. The British tanks, likely M3 Stuarts delivered through Lend-Lease channels, are maneuvering beyond direct line of sight. Another explosion, this time on the flank. Across the clearing, British tank commanders speak calmly into wireless set number 19 radios mounted beside them. Red 2, pivot right, 10 degrees. Enemy armor exposed left. The order travels instantly. Harada waits for a flag from Major Sato's command vehicle. None appears. Dust and foliage obscure the view. Seconds stretch. Finally, a red and white flag snaps upward from the command tank, visible only to half the formation. Advance 10 meters, adjust right. But by the time the motion is interpreted, the British have shifted again. Shellfire walks methodically across the Japanese line. The Chiha guns fire back, but aim lags behind the moving threat. Each tank acts on delayed visual confirmation. Coordination falters. Harada realizes he cannot see the entire formation anymore. Smoke now curls between vehicles. Infantry runners attempt to carry shouted instructions from one tank to another, ducking beneath ricocheting rounds. A British Stuart darts from behind a copse of trees, fires, then reverses immediately. Its commander receives new direction through headphones before the Japanese can adjust. Harada slams his fist against the turret wall. Signal for wheel left. His gunner hesitates. Sir, I cannot see the colonel's flag. They are waiting for authority that cannot reach them in time. The engagement lasts less than 20 minutes. When it ends, 2 Chiha tanks burn on the roadside. The British withdraw smoothly, engines fading into jungle haze. Afterward, beneath a canvas tent illuminated by lantern light, Major Sato addresses his officers. Sweat streaks his collar. The enemy maneuvered unexpectedly, he says carefully. Visibility was limited. Lieutenant Harada clears his throat. Sir, their coordination was immediate. They shifted positions without visible signals. Sato's expression tightens. Wireless transmissions. Yes, we have reports. There is silence. Radios invite interception. Sato continues. They create dependency. Discipline prevents chaos. No one argues further. Reports sent to Rangoon describe the skirmish as inconclusive. Tactical setback, terrain disadvantage, no mention of communication lag. But some men remember the seconds lost. Autumn, 1942, Guadalcanal. Though primarily an infantry and naval struggle, limited armored elements operate on the island's fringes. Japanese light tanks attempt coordinated support against American defensive lines near Henderson Field. Rain turns soil to mud. Visibility collapses in jungle humidity. Inside a Type 95. Corporal Ishitaro hears only engine strain and shouted orders muffled by rain. The prearranged assault timing depended on synchronized watches and line-of-sight flag signals. Yet American Marines inside M3 Stuarts adjust constantly. Their SCR-508 radios crackle with updates from forward observers. When one avenue of attack bogs down, commanders redirect within seconds. Ishii's tank advances according to the original timetable. No new instruction reaches him when the left flank stalls. By the time visual confirmation of the delay arrives, American anti-tank guns have repositioned. A 37mm round penetrates a companion vehicle. Fire spills from its hatch. After the failed push, Colonel Ichiki's staff attributes the setback to insufficient artillery preparation and difficult terrain. The doctrine remains intact. Planning must be more thorough. Signals more disciplined. Not once does the official conclusion state what many junior officers are beginning to suspect, that battles no longer unfold according to expectation. At an armored school near Kurume, instructors continue emphasizing semaphore precision. Cadets practice raising flags in synchronized patterns atop stationary tanks. Captain Masaru Iwata, now a senior instructor, mentions the Burma encounter cautiously during a lecture. Enemy wireless sets allowed rapid maneuver, he says. A visiting procurement official interrupts gently. Our focus must remain on offensive spirit. Equipment cannot replace resolve. Iwata bows slightly. The subject shifts. Meanwhile, across the Pacific in North Africa, American armored units refine radio coordination under fire. Tank commanders speak while moving, adjusting formations mid-engagement. Lessons accumulate. In Tokyo, summaries of foreign battles are filtered through optimism. The Imperial General Staff believes rigid planning ensures clarity. Radios risk disorder. A tank commander distracted by chatter may lose focus, but on the ground, seconds matter. In Burma and on Guadalcanal, seconds have already been lost. Lieutenant Harada writes in his private notebook months later, "Enemy reacts as one body. We move as instructed limbs." He closes the journal quickly when footsteps approach. No doctrine has been officially questioned. No redesign ordered. The flags remain standard issue. Radios remain rare. Early warnings flicker like distant lightning on the horizon. Brief, dismissible, easy to attribute to circumstance. No one in command believes a storm is gathering. November 23rd, 1943. 6:10 a.m. Near Macon Atoll, Gilbert Islands. The sky is pale gray, streaked with thin cloud over coral sand and shattered palm trunks. Smoke drifts inland from naval bombardment. The ground trembles with distant naval gunfire from American battleships offshore. Inside, a concealed revetment near the lagoon. Second Lieutenant Koji Matsumoto wipes condensation from the inside of his Type 95 Ha-Go's periscope. The tank's engine idles softly, diesel fumes mixing with salt air. Infantry of the 3rd Special Base Force crouch in trenches nearby, rifles resting along sandbags. Matsumoto has memorized the defense plan for weeks. The Americans will land at predicted beaches. Their advance will be funneled between predetermined kill zones. The tanks will counterattack on signal once the infantry halts them at the waterline. Timing will decide everything. He checks his watch. The assault should already be unfolding according to the sequence rehearsed in briefings. Then the unexpected arrives, not in noise, but in speed. Across the reef, American landing craft surge forward in coordinated waves. Behind them, M3 Stuart light tanks roll down ramps from LCM vessels. As soon as their tracks bite sand, their commanders speak into microphones fixed near their mouths. Blue 6 to all units, resistance light on left, shift right flank 30 yards. The words travel instantly. Matsumoto sees one Stuart veer sharply away from the expected route, pivoting toward an unguarded gap between bunkers. There is no pause, no visible signal. He waits for the prearranged moment. His company commander, Captain Hayashi, stands half-exposed in his own tank, scanning for visual confirmation from infantry observers who are meant to raise a flare once the Americans were stalled. But the Americans are not stalled. Their movement is fluid. When one landing craft is disabled, another shifts position immediately. When a bunker fires unexpectedly, 2 Stuarts swing their turrets simultaneously and suppress it within seconds. Matsumoto hears distant bursts of American .30 caliber machine guns. The tempo feels wrong, faster than the rehearsals anticipated. Signal from Captain Hayashi. He calls down to his gunner. "Not yet, sir." Another Stuart pivots again, adjusting to avoid a destroyed palm trunk. Its commander receives fresh direction through headphones. A squad of Marines takes cover behind it as it advances. Hayashi finally raises a red flag from his hatch. "Advance." Matsumoto pushes his throttle forward. The Hago lurches from concealment onto sand. 3 other Japanese tanks emerge in parallel, attempting to form a coordinated counterstrike. But the Americans are already repositioning. Red 3, Japanese armor emerging center. Adjust fire, elevation low. The order is spoken calmly through static. Before Matsumoto can align his 37mm gun, a shell slams into the sand beside him. Another strikes the thin armor of the tank to his right. The impact punches through. Smoke erupts from the hatch. Matsumoto swings his turret toward the nearest Stuart. He fires. The shot ricochets off the angled frontal armor. "Shift left," he shouts, but he cannot see Captain Hayashi anymore. Smoke and palm debris obscure line of sight. The formation fractures. An American Stuart reverses slightly while still firing, guided by voice commands. Its crew hears updates from an unseen commander coordinating several tanks at once. Matsumoto feels the difference now. Each Japanese tank reacts independently once visual contact is lost. Each American tank reacts as part of a speaking network. A Stuart darts behind a low dune and reappears seconds later at a new angle. Matsumoto did not anticipate the maneuver. No flag signaled the change. No time was allotted for adaptation. His second shot misses wide. An American shell strikes his left track, jolting the vehicle sideways. The engine sputters. Inside the cramped turret, Matsumoto hears his driver curse. The tank is immobilized. Through the periscope, he sees American tanks fanning outward, covering each other's blind spots. Orders overlap in quick succession. "Hold center, infantry advancing right, armor support on my mark." The speed is disorienting. Matsumoto tries to spot Hayashi again. A flag, any signal, a gesture to restore structure. There is nothing but smoke and shifting silhouettes. The plan had depended on the Americans behaving predictably. Instead, they are adapting in real time. A final impact rocks his turret. Metal fragments slice through the interior. Matsumoto collapses against the breech of the gun as smoke fills the compartment. Outside, the remaining Japanese tanks withdraw in scattered directions, lacking unified instruction. The engagement lasts minutes. By midday, the American advance secures the beachhead faster than Japanese staff projections estimated. Later, in a dim bunker lit by a single oil lamp, surviving officers gather. Captain Hayashi's face is streaked with soot. "They altered their approach continuously," he says quietly. Without delay, a staff lieutenant flips through the defensive timetable pages smudged with sand. "Perhaps our timing was miscalculated." Hayashi does not answer immediately. In Washington and Pearl Harbor, reports from Macon describe efficient armored coordination. Standardized CAN SCR-508 radios have proven reliable under combat conditions. Tank commanders speak freely while maneuvering. In Tokyo, the summary reaches the Army Ministry weeks later. Enemy light tanks employed aggressive movement, the report states. Counterattack delayed by terrain confusion. No one writes that communication speed decided the exchange. No one states that rigid timing collapsed under fluid opposition. But among the surviving tank crews, the realization has begun to take shape. The battlefield is accelerating, and Japanese doctrine remains fixed. June 15, 1944. 8:32 a.m., coastal plain west of Aslito Airfield, Saipan. The sky over Saipan is already thick with smoke from naval bombardment. Palm trees burn along the ridgeline. American artillery shells arc inland in steady intervals. The ground vibrates beneath the tracks of advancing armor. Inside a Type 97. Chiha, positioned behind a low coral outcrop, Captain Hiroshi Nagata studies the shoreline through binoculars. His 9th Tank Regiment has been ordered to counterattack once the American beachhead begins to consolidate. The plan was finalized days earlier. Routes are marked, assembly points confirmed. Infantry coordination prearranged. The Americans will land, suffer casualties slow under defensive fire, then stall. That is how the timetable reads. Behind Nagata's tank engines idle in disciplined silence. Each vehicle commander grips rolled signal flags ready for the precise moment of commitment. A runner arrives breathless from battalion headquarters. The enemy armor has pushed farther inland than expected. Nagata lowers his glasses. Impossible. Artillery concentration was sufficient. The runner swallows. They adjusted after landing, sir. They are bypassing strong points. At that exact moment, American M4 Sherman tanks crest a shallow rise nearly a kilometer inland. Their radios crackle with overlapping commands. White 2 pivot left and cover that draw. Infantry pinned near the cane field. Armor, move now. The orders are immediate, flexible, constant. Colonel Yukio Sumida, commanding the regiment, stands upright in his lead tank several hundred meters behind Nagata. He scans the field for visual signals from forward observers who are meant to raise colored panels once the Americans slowed. But the panels do not appear. Instead, reports arrive through dismounted couriers describing American armor maneuvering around fixed defenses rather than confronting them head-on. Sumida hesitates only briefly before lifting a red flag high above his hatch. Advance, according to plan. Nagata sees the signal and relays it down the line. Engines roar. The Japanese formation rolls forward across uneven coral terrain, attempting to establish a coordinated strike on what they believe is a predictable axis of advance. Within minutes, the flaw becomes visible. American Sherman tanks shift positions mid-movement. Their commanders speak into SCR 508 radio sets, adjusting spacing, calling for infantry support, coordinating with forward artillery observers who transmit new target data continuously. Nagata halts his tank momentarily, scanning for the rest of his company. Dust clouds obscure vision. Smoke thickens as American naval gunfire continues inland. He raises a yellow flag to indicate slight left adjustment. Only 2 tanks behind him see it. Further back, Captain Kenji Mori misinterprets the movement and continues straight, believing the main assault remains centered on the pre-briefed route. Without radio contact, no correction reaches him in time. American observers spot the separated Japanese element. Enemy armor split. Engage the isolated unit. The message flows instantly across multiple tanks. Sherman turrets rotate in unison. A coordinated volley erupts. Mori's lead vehicle absorbs a direct hit to the frontal plate. Fire bursts from its turret ring. Nagata sees the explosion but cannot determine whether it signals a flanking maneuver or accidental detonation. There is no way to ask, no channel for clarification. He presses forward anyway. His gunner fires at a distant Sherman. The shell strikes but fails to penetrate effectively. The American tank reverses slightly while another moves to its side, covering its blind arc. Shift fire left. Japanese armor attempting regroup. The tempo is relentless. Nagata attempts to realign his remaining tanks using flags. Smoke and dust swallow the signals. Several vehicles hesitate, unsure whether to continue forward or withdraw. Colonel Sumida, observing from the rear, realizes the formation is fragmenting. He considers sending a staff officer forward to issue revised orders. But by the time such an officer arrives, the battlefield geometry will have changed again. American artillery begins landing precisely between the disjointed Japanese units. Forward observers embedded with armored elements have relayed coordinates by radio within seconds of spotting movement. The ground erupts beneath Nagata's tracks. Shrapnel ricochets off his turret. He feels it now unmistakably. The Americans are not reacting to a plan. They are reshaping it moment by moment. A Sherman emerges unexpectedly from a shallow depression on his right flank, having received updated positioning moments earlier. Its 75mm gun flashes. The impact slams into Nagata's side armor. Metal buckles inward. The interior fills with smoke and screaming. Across the field, scattered Japanese tanks attempt withdrawal. But retreat signals are inconsistent. Some crews believe the counterattack continues. Others assume a general fallback. There is no single voice to unify the response. By midday, the planned armored thrust has dissolved into isolated skirmishes. American forces consolidate positions with coordinated infantry armor integration. Radios hum continuously. In a temporary command shelter carved into coral rock, Colonel Sumida studies the aftermath reports. Our timing was correct, he insists quietly to his staff. The execution faltered. Major Takeda ventures cautiously. Sir, the enemy alters formation continuously. Their tanks appear guided by constant instruction. Sumida's jaw tightens. Discipline must overcome improvisation. Yet even as he speaks, fresh reports describe American armor repositioning within minutes to exploit new openings. The Japanese counterattack had depended on synchronized movement executed once. The Americans fight as an evolving conversation. On Saipan's scorched plain, the gap between those approaches widens irreversibly. July 24th, 1944. 4:50 a.m., outskirts of Agana, Guam. The air is thick with humidity and the lingering haze of pre-dawn bombardment. Palm fronds sway in uneven gusts. Somewhere beyond the low hills, American naval guns thud in slow, deliberate rhythm. The sound rolls across the island like distant thunder. Lieutenant Colonel Ichiro Tanabe stands beside his command type 97, Chiha boots planted in damp soil. Around him, the remnants of the 18th Tank Regiment prepare for what has been described as a decisive counterstroke. The Americans have landed days earlier. They have pushed inland faster than expected, bypassing prepared obstacles, isolating defensive pockets. Tanabe listens as his adjutant reads the final briefing under the beam of a hooded flashlight. Objective: disrupt American armor concentration near Fonta Plateau. Assault begins at 0500. Signal sequence as rehearsed. The plan is meticulous. Routes traced along ravines. Phase lines designated by terrain features. Infantry liaison officers assigned to each tank platoon. Colored flags folded neatly inside every turret. Tanabe nods once. Precision will restore initiative. Across the darkened field, tank engines ignite one by one. Diesel smoke rises in ghostly plumes. What Tanabe cannot see beyond the ridgeline is a column of American M4 Sherman tanks, idling in staggered formation, their antennas silhouetted against the faint light. Inside each vehicle, commanders adjust throat microphones and listen to the low murmur of overlapping voices. Dog company holding left ridge. Enemy armor expected from south. Maintain spacing. The network is alive before the first shot. At exactly 500, Tanabe raises a red flag. Advance. The Japanese tanks move forward in disciplined formation tracks, grinding over rock and mud. Infantry follow closely, rifles ready. The dawn light grows stronger, revealing the rolling terrain ahead. For several minutes, there is no contact. Tanabe allows himself a measured breath. Perhaps the Americans have overextended. Perhaps their coordination has faltered. Then a single American forward observer spots movement from a concealed position on the plateau's edge. Armor sighted, multiple vehicles, bearing 180. Within seconds, the message spreads across multiple American tanks. Prepare flanking maneuver. Shermans begin to reposition even before the Japanese crest the rise. Tanabe's lead platoon emerges onto open ground. Immediately, American fire erupts from two directions. A Sherman on the left ridge fires, then receives instruction to pull back slightly as another takes its place. On the right, two more adjust spacing to avoid presenting clustered targets. Tanabe scans for Captain Morimoto's signal, indicating left pivot. He sees nothing but dust and muzzle flashes. Morimoto, several hundred meters away, attempts to raise a blue flag. Smoke from exploding shells obscures the gesture. The tanks behind him hesitate, uncertain. American tank commanders speak in rapid succession. Enemy center exposed. Shift to enfilade. Infantry falling back. Cover them. The Japanese formation, designed for a single synchronized thrust, begins to stretch unevenly under crossfire. Tanabe orders his driver forward, hoping to regain cohesion through momentum. His gunner fires at a distant Sherman. The shell strikes but glances off. Before he can reload, another American tank has already shifted position based on radioed observation from a neighboring unit. The battlefield feels unstable like ground that will not hold still. A runner attempts to sprint between two Japanese tanks, carrying revised instructions from Morimoto. He falls halfway caught in machine gun fire. Tanabe realizes he cannot even confirm which units remain operational. Line of sight is broken by terrain folds and smoke. Without radios, each platoon fights in partial blindness. The Americans, meanwhile, tighten their arc. Japanese armor splitting. Collapse the gap. The order moves through airwaves faster than any flag could rise. Sherman tanks adjust angle and distance continuously. One reverses slightly to draw fire, while another advances to exploit the distraction. Tanabe feels the turning point, not as a single moment, but as a shift in tempo. His plan depended on reaching a specific coordinate at a specific minute with intact formation. The Americans have erased the certainty of that minute. A shell slams into Morimoto's tank. Flames burst upward. Tanabe sees it clearly now. There is no regroup signal, no unified retreat. He attempts to signal fallback with a white flag, but only the nearest vehicle responds. Others continue pressing forward, unaware the attack has already failed. Within 30 minutes, the counterstroke has disintegrated. Japanese tanks burn across the plateau, isolated and unsupported. American armor continues moving, communicating, adjusting. By sunrise, the field belongs to the Americans. Later that afternoon, in a bunker carved into volcanic rock, Tanabe sits before a map stained with sweat and ash. Major General Takeshi Takashina listens as surviving officers describe the engagement. They anticipated every adjustment, Tanabe says quietly. They moved before our signals were visible. Takashina studies him carefully. Then we must plan more precisely. Tanabe hesitates. For the first time, he does not agree. The problem was not precision, it was time. And time now belongs to the side that can speak while moving. No official report will frame it that way. The summary will cite overwhelming enemy material and air superiority. But among those who stood on the plateau, something unspoken settles into certainty. The war has shifted into a speed the doctrine was never designed to match. October 23rd, 1944. 2:40 p.m. Foothills east of Palo Leyte, Philippine Islands. Rain falls in uneven sheets, turning the narrow roads into ribbons of mud. Coconut palms bend under wind coming off the Pacific. The American landings on Leyte have already shattered the coastal defense line. Now the Imperial Japanese Army attempts to halt the inland thrust before it reaches the mountain passes. Colonel Seiichi Tomita of the 2nd Tank Division stands half-exposed from his Type 97 Shinhoto Chiha binoculars pressed to his eyes. The upgraded 47mm gun protrudes from his turret slick with rain. Around him, a mixed group of Chiha and older Type 95 tanks waits in staggered concealment along a jungle-edged slope. The counterattack order came at noon. Strike the advancing American column before it consolidates near the Burauen Road junction. Timing is critical. Surprise essential. Tomita lowers his binoculars. Through breaks in the foliage, he sees them. American ore. 4 Shermans advancing cautiously along the muddy road, infantry riding partially sheltered behind them. Their antennas whip with each jolt over uneven ground. Even at this distance, Tomita knows what those thin rods mean. Constant contact. He raises a red flag, signaling readiness. Company commanders repeat the gesture. The formation is prepared to surge forward on his next command. Below, an American tank commander named Captain Harold Whitaker listens to overlapping reports in his headset. Scouts report possible armor movement in tree line north. Artillery adjusting grid reference, standby. Whitaker does not need to see the threat yet. He already knows it exists. Tomita waits for the American column to reach the designated kill zone marked on his map earlier that morning. He checks his watch. The rain complicates visibility, but the timing appears correct. He thrusts the red flag forward. Advance. Japanese tanks roar from concealment tracks, grinding through mud and foliage. For a brief instant, surprise holds. A Shinhoto Chi-Ha fires first, its 47mm shell striking the lead Sherman's side. The American tank jerks smoke rising from its engine compartment. Tomita feels a surge of vindication. Then the American response begins, before the echo of the shot fades. Contact North Tree Line. Armor confirmed. Spread formation. Whitaker's voice carries to every nearby Sherman instantly. 2 tanks peel left off the road, creating a wider arc. Another reverses slightly to allow infantry to dismount and take cover. Artillery coordinates are transmitted within seconds. Tomita attempts to redirect his second platoon toward the American flank. He raises a yellow flag to indicate wheel right. Only 1 tank behind him sees it clearly. The others are partially obscured by dense rain and smoke from the disabled Sherman. A Japanese platoon leader further down the slope interprets the lack of new signal as instruction to continue straight toward the road. His tanks emerge directly into crossfire from Shermans that have already shifted positions based on radioed warning. American guns fire in coordinated rhythm. 1 Japanese tank explodes its thin armor, unable to withstand the 75mm impact. Another loses a track and pivots helplessly. Tomita shouts for fallback. He raises a white flag, waving urgently. But the rain distorts visibility. Mud splashes across periscopes. Engines roar so loudly that shouted orders vanish in the noise. Meanwhile, Whitaker hears a new transmission. Enemy armor attempting withdrawal southeast. Cut them off. The Americans adjust again, sealing the gap. Tomita realizes the kill zone he designed no longer exists. The Americans reshaped it within moments of first contact. Artillery shells begin landing among the Japanese tanks with disturbing precision. Forward observers have relayed coordinates through secure radio channels. The explosions scatter vehicles that were meant to remain tightly synchronized. Inside his turret, Tomita feels the vibration of near misses. His loader struggles to chamber another round as the tank lurches over uneven ground. He sees Captain Yamada's tank burning 30 meters away. No signal from him, no confirmation of status. Every decision now is isolated. A Shinhoto Chi-Ha manages to disable another Sherman at close range. But before the crew can celebrate, 2 additional American tanks converge, guided by rapid voice commands. Tomita understands in that instant that they are not fighting a line. They are fighting a conversation. He attempts one last coordinated push toward the road to break through before encirclement. He signals forward with both arms raised, abandoning formal flag procedure. Half the remaining tanks follow. The rest hesitate, uncertain whether retreat or advance has been ordered. The Americans do not hesitate. Concentrate fire center. Collapse that thrust. Sherman cannons flash. Machine guns rake the tree line. The Japanese advance dissolves under converging fire. Within 20 minutes, the jungle is filled with burning wreckage and scattered infantry retreating uphill. Tomita's tank reverses behind a ridge engine coughing. Only 3 vehicles remain operational near him. Rain continues to fall. In a temporary field shelter carved from bamboo and tarp, Tomita reports to Lieutenant General Sosaku Suzuki's staff later that evening. "We achieved initial surprise," he says, voice hoarse. "But the enemy redistributed strength immediately. An aide responds quietly. Their radios allowed instant adaptation. Silence fills the shelter. No one denies it now. The shock is no longer theoretical. It is measured in wrecked tanks and broken formations, and for the first time, desperation replaces confidence. October 25th, 1944. 9:10 a.m. Road junction near Karigara, northern Leyte. The rain has stopped, but the ground remains churned into thick brown paste by days of movement. Smoke drifts lazily across shattered rice paddies. The distant crack of rifle fire echoes from the hills. Major General Kiyoyuki Yamashita of the 2nd Tank Division stands over a spread map pinned against the hood of a staff car. His gloved finger traces the original operational design. A sweeping armored strike from the mountains east of Karigara, timed to intersect the American advance along Highway 2. Infantry would pin. Tanks would break through. The Americans would be forced back toward the coast. It was precise. It is now impossible. Reports arrive not as structured summaries, but as fragments, Colonel Tomita's unit reduced to a handful of operational tanks. Captain Yamada killed. Multiple platoons unaccounted for. Yamashita closes his eyes briefly. Where are the Americans concentrated now? A staff officer hesitates. Sir, they have shifted positions repeatedly. Sherman's reported on 3 separate ridge lines within the past hour. Which is primary? We cannot confirm. Because confirmation requires communication speed they do not possess. Across the muddy road below, the remnants of a Japanese armored company idle behind sparse cover. Tank commanders peer through optics searching for visual signals that will unify them. Instead, they see American Shermans maneuvering in flexible arcs. Antennas sway above each turret. Infantry squads move confidently beside them, receiving constant updates from armored commanders. Captain Harold Whitaker's voice carries through his headset. Enemy armor regrouping north. Redirect 3rd platoon. Hold the southern ridge. The Americans adjust like water flowing around stone. Yamashita straightens. We will proceed with the mountain thrust regardless. The original objective stands. His adjutant glances toward the distant ridges. Sir, the enemy is no longer where the objective was defined. Yamashita's jaw tightens. Then they must be forced back. Orders are relayed down the chain through runners and shouted commands. Flags rise and fall as tank commanders attempt to realign formations for a renewed push southward. The movement is slow. Each adjustment requires visual confirmation. Each pause creates vulnerability. On the American side, aerial reconnaissance from liaison aircraft reports Japanese movement within minutes. The information reaches ground units through radio nets almost instantly. Sherman units shift east, prepare to intercept. Japanese tanks begin descending a narrow slope in staggered formation, intending to strike what Yamashita believes is the American center. But by the time they crest the final ridge, the center has shifted. Shermans appear on their flank, instead already positioned to fire. The first volley cripples 2 Chiha tanks before they can align their guns. Captain Mori, now commanding what remains of his platoon, searches desperately for Yamashita's signal. Smoke obscures the command tank's position. He must choose independently. He orders forward movement, hoping momentum will disrupt American coordination. It does not. Whitaker hears a transmission from a forward scout. Japanese armor attempting push through narrow valley. Whitaker responds immediately. Block the exit. Bring artillery grid 267. American shells begin falling ahead of Mori's advancing tanks, sealing the valley mouth. The Japanese formation compresses under fire. Without radios, coordination collapses into instinct. Some tanks attempt to retreat, others continue forward. The column fractures. Yamashita watches through binoculars as his intended breakthrough disintegrates into chaos. He understands now that the original plan depended on static enemy positioning. Every arrow on his map assumed predictable resistance. The Americans have erased predictability. A staff officer approaches breathless. Sir, the southern approach is now exposed. Sherman's advancing through rice paddies. Yamashita feels the plan slipping away not in a single dramatic moment, but in layers. First, the timing failed. Then the concentration failed. Now the objective itself dissolves. He orders a general fallback to higher ground. Flags wave urgently across the hillside. Some tanks comply. Others do not see the signal in time. A Shinhoto Chiha continues forward and is struck broadside by a Sherman that had repositioned moments earlier. Flames erupt. American coordination tightens like a noose. Tanks reposition fluidly to exploit every hesitation. Within an hour, the mountain thrust that was meant to reverse the momentum of the campaign has become a scattered withdrawal uphill. Yamashita lowers his binoculars slowly. The original plan is no longer executable. Not because of insufficient courage, not because of inferior firepower, but because every decision arrives too late. Below him, Shermans continue moving antennas, swaying voices overlapping inside steel hulls. The battlefield no longer pauses long enough for flags to matter, and the collapse of the plan is complete. October 27th, 1944. 6:35 p.m., hills north of Ormoc Valley Leyte. Dusk settles unevenly over the broken terrain. Smoke clings low to the ground trapped between ridge lines. The air smells of oil, wet earth, and burnt cordite. What remains of the 2nd Tank Division is scattered among coconut groves and shallow defensive pits hastily carved into the hillside. Lieutenant General Sosaku Suzuki studies a dim lantern-lit map inside a bamboo command shelter. The map still shows the original counter-offensive arrows sweeping confidently toward the American landing zones. None of those arrows reflect reality anymore. Colonel Seiichi Tomita stands opposite him, uniform streaked with mud and soot. "We still possess operational armor," Tomita insists quietly. "If concentrated at night, we may strike their supply column." Suzuki nods slowly. "Night will reduce their visibility." Tomita hesitates before adding, "and perhaps limit their radio coordination." It is the first time the word is spoken openly at this level. Outside, mechanics work frantically beneath tarps, patching damaged tracks and clearing jammed breaches. A Shinhoto Chi-Ha engine coughs, then stabilizes. Crews reload ammunition by hand in near darkness. The recovery plan forms quickly. Under cover of night, remaining tanks will descend in 2 columns, converging on an American logistics route identified earlier that afternoon. Surprise will compensate for fragmentation. At 8:10 p.m., the engines start. The Japanese tanks move slowly downhill, headlights, dark commanders straining to maintain visual spacing through faint silhouettes. Flags are useless in the dark. Instead, they rely on predetermined intervals and whispered instructions passed from tank to tank during staging. Tomita leads the right column. He cannot see the left column at all. Halfway down the slope, an American listening post detects engine noise. Within seconds, the information travels. Unidentified armor movement, North Ridge. Captain Harold Whitaker, now positioned near the supply route, hears the report through his headset. He responds instantly. "All units stand by. Possible night assault. Adjust perimeter." Sherman tanks reposition even in darkness, guided by voice commands. Some crews switch to red-filtered lamps inside their turrets. Infantry are alerted through portable radios linked to the same network. Tomita believes the descent remains undetected. Then a flare rises unexpectedly to his left. The Americans fire illumination rounds. The hillside is bathed in harsh white light. Japanese tanks freeze momentarily, exposed mid-descent. There is no unified signal for immediate adaptation under these conditions. Each commander must interpret independently. American voices overlap calmly. "Contacten from Teat." Confirmed. Multiple vehicles descending. 3rd platoon shift right 20 meters. Artillery grid. 312. Tomita waves his arm forward, urging speed. His tank accelerates downhill. The column behind him struggles to maintain formation on uneven ground. The first American artillery shells land not randomly but precisely along the likely descent path. Forward observers have relayed coordinates via radio within moments of spotting the flare's silhouettes. A Japanese tank to Tomita's rear explodes under direct hit. The blast disorients the following vehicle, which veers sideways into a shallow ditch. Without radio contact between columns, the left group continues descending, unaware that the right is already under concentrated fire. Whitaker hears the updated report. Enemy armor split into 2 elements. He responds immediately. Left platoon pivot and engage 2nd column. Shermans reposition in darkness, guided by voice, their engines adjusting direction before Japanese commanders even realize their exposure. Tomita reaches the valley floor only to find Shermans already angled toward him, guns elevated. He fires first, disabling 1 American tank at close range. For a brief instant, the surprise seems restored. Then Whitaker's voice cuts through static. "All units focus on lead vehicle." 3 Shermans fire nearly simultaneously. Tomita's tank shudders violently. The second impact penetrates. Smoke fills the turret. He orders evacuation. The crew scrambles into the darkness as machine gun fire rakes the area. Above them on the hillside, the left Japanese column finally encounters American fire from a completely different angle. Confusion spreads instantly. Without communication between columns, no coordinated withdrawal is possible. Some tanks attempt to retreat uphill. Others push forward blindly, hoping to break through the American perimeter. Within 40 minutes, the night assault disintegrates into scattered wreckage along the valley. Back in the command shelter near Ormok, Suzuki receives fragmented reports carried by breathless runners. Right column destroyed. Left column heavily damaged. Colonel Tomita's status unknown. Suzuki closes his eyes. The attempt to recover momentum has instead consumed what little armored strength remained. The Americans continue transmitting calmly through the night. adjusting patrol routes, redistributing supply convoys around the destroyed assault path. Communication has turned even darkness into an advantage. And now, there is almost nothing left to maneuver. November 1st, 1944. 11:20 a.m. Ridge overlooking Ormoc Valley Leyte. The rain has returned, thin and relentless. Mist drifts across the valley floor, where burned-out hulls of Type 97 tanks lie half-sunken in mud. The once ambitious counteroffensive is now reduced to scattered defensive pockets clinging to high ground. Lieutenant General Sosaku Suzuki stands beneath a makeshift canvas awning stretched between two shattered trees. Before him, through field glasses fogged at the edges, American Sherman tanks move steadily along the valley road. Their antennas sway like metronomes, marking a rhythm he cannot interrupt. He lowers the glasses slowly. Beside him, Major Kenji Takahashi reads from the latest field reports. Remaining operational tanks, 5 confirmed. Ammunition low, fuel reserves critical. Suzuki nods once. Far below, Captain Harold Whitaker receives a transmission inside his Sherman. Japanese armor minimal. Continue advance north. Infantry will sweep ridge line. Whitaker replies without hesitation. Maintain spacing. Watch for concealed guns. The Americans do not pause. Their movements are not dramatic, not reckless. They are deliberate and constant, guided by voices that never stop. Suzuki remembers the first landings in 1941. Lingayen Gulf, the confidence, the clean lines of advancing columns guided by bright signal flags. Battles had felt structured then like rehearsed maneuvers executed under real fire. Now the battlefield feels fluid, shapeless. Colonel Seiichi Tomita, his arm bandaged, approaches slowly. He survived the night assault by crawling through drainage ditches until dawn. They reposition before we complete a maneuver, Tomita says quietly. Every time. Suzuki does not respond immediately. Below, a small group of surviving Japanese tanks attempts to relocate to secondary defensive positions along the ridge. The commanders rely on hand signals and shouted instructions, careful not to expose themselves unnecessarily. One tank halts briefly as its driver misinterprets a gesture. That hesitation lasts only seconds. It is enough. An American forward observer spots the movement through binoculars and speaks into his radio. Enemy armor shifting northwest slope. Within moments, Whitaker hears the update. Redirect 2nd Platoon. Engage slope target. 2 Shermans peel off the main road, climbing toward the ridge at oblique angles. The Japanese tank commander sees them only after they crest a lower hill already aligned to fire. He raises a white cloth, intending to signal withdrawal. The shell strikes before the cloth is fully visible. Suzuki flinches slightly at the distant explosion. There is no anger in his expression now. No insistence on precision, only recognition. He turns to Tomita. How long between their observation and engagement? Tomita answers without looking away from the valley. Less than a minute. Suzuki closes his eyes briefly. For years, armored doctrine emphasized discipline, coordination, obedience to predetermined sequence. Every operation began with certainty that correct planning would dominate uncertainty. But planning assumes the enemy moves within predictable bounds. The Americans do not. They speak while moving. They move while thinking. Their tanks are not isolated instruments awaiting visual command. They are nodes in a continuous exchange. Suzuki looks again at the valley road. Shermans are already spreading out to secure a crossroads that had been marked on Japanese maps as a fallback point. The maps are now irrelevant. The crossroads is no longer a fallback. It is simply another point the Americans have claimed before a Japanese countermeasure could form. He feels it settle fully then, not as a dramatic collapse, as a quiet inevitability. Even if additional tanks arrived tomorrow, even if fuel and ammunition were plentiful, the tempo would remain the same. Flags cannot compete with voices carried instantly through air. Predetermined timing cannot overtake constant adaptation. The doctrine itself is obsolete. Suzuki lowers his field glasses for the final time that morning. Order remaining armor to disperse into defensive positions, he says calmly. No further counterattacks. Tomita hesitates. Sir, that concedes initiative. Suzuki nods. Initiative has already been conceded. Below them, American radios continue their steady murmur, coordinating infantry sweeps and armored advances with mechanical precision. The ridge falls silent except for distant engine noise and the soft crackle of burning wreckage. And in that silence, realization is complete. December 10th, 1944, 4:25 p.m., northern outskirts of Ormoc-Leyte. The light is fading early beneath heavy cloud cover. Smoke still drifts across the shattered remains of Japanese defensive positions. The once formidable 2nd Tank Division is no longer a maneuver force. It is debris scattered across hills and roads that no longer matter. Lieutenant General Sosaku Suzuki stands near what used to be his forward command position. The bamboo shelter has collapsed under shell fire. Maps lie soaked in mud, their bold arrows smeared into meaningless streaks. Below him, American M4 Shermans roll steadily through Ormoc's ruined streets. Infantry move beside them in practiced coordination. Antennas sway, catching faint glints of dying sunlight. The murmur of radio traffic carries faintly, even at this distance, an unbroken chain of voices linking vehicles, artillery batteries, and advancing rifle companies. Captain Harold Whitaker's Sherman halts briefly at an intersection choked with debris. His headset crackles. Bridge ahead, secure. Enemy resistance minimal. Whitaker responds evenly. Advance 2 blocks. Maintain interval. The column moves without pause. Suzuki watches not with fury, but with the detached clarity of someone observing a conclusion already written. Behind him, only 3 operational Japanese tanks remain concealed among the trees. Their fuel reserves are nearly exhausted. Ammunition is counted shell by shell. Crews sit inside their vehicles in tense silence, waiting for an order that will not restore what has been lost. Colonel Seiichi Tomita approaches slowly, his uniform hanging loosely from weeks of strain. We can attempt one final engagement before withdrawal to the mountains, Tomita offers quietly. Suzuki does not turn. To what purpose? Tomita hesitates. To disrupt their momentum. Suzuki gestures toward the town below. Observe their momentum. Shermans pivot through intersections guided by constant instruction. When one halts to clear rubble, another immediately adjusts route. Artillery observers reposition in tandem, communicating corrections without delay. Infantry squads receive updates even as they advance from building to building. There is no hesitation in their movement. The Japanese tanks, by contrast, sit in isolation. No shared awareness. No collective voice binding them together. A sudden burst of American machine gun fire echoes from the town center. Suzuki raises his binoculars one last time. Through drifting smoke, he sees a lone Japanese tank attempting to relocate along a side street, perhaps hoping to catch a Sherman unaware. It moves only 20 meters before a transmission reaches Whitaker. Single enemy tank moving east alley. Whitaker answers instantly. Block alley, engage. 2 Shermans adjust their course smoothly, sealing the narrow street from opposite ends. Their guns fire almost simultaneously. The Japanese tank erupts in flame. Suzuki lowers the glasses. There is no need for further observation. The surviving crews behind him know it as well. Inside their turrets, hands rest on folded signal flags that will not be raised again. By nightfall, orders are issued to destroy remaining vehicles that cannot be evacuated. Engines are sabotaged. Breach mechanisms smashed with hammers. Fuel drained and set alight. Flames climb into the dark sky. No grand final charge. No dramatic reversal. Just the quiet elimination of what remains. In Tokyo, summaries will attribute the loss of Leyte to overwhelming naval and air superiority. To supply shortages. To attrition. All true. But on the ground, in the seconds between sighting and destruction, another truth has already settled among those who fought. The battlefield had changed its tempo. Japanese armored doctrine depended on structure, on obedience to a plan conceived before first contact. That structure required time. Time to see, time to signal, time to respond. American radios removed that time. They shortened the distance between observation and action until hesitation itself became fatal. Lieutenant General Suzuki turns away from the burning tanks. Prepare withdrawal, he says quietly. There is no argument. The men disperse into darkness, leaving behind twisted steel and blackened earth. Below, American engines continue to hum. Voices continue to move through static, steady, and unbroken. Communication, not firepower, has decided the outcome.